Hello everyone, it is Joe here from OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon, and today we will continue our Crimson Invasion deck analysis today with Silvally Buzzwole. It's an interesting archetype that was sort of brewed up by Benji Hutchins and myself. We were both sort of comparing lists and we've been testing it together for a little bit. He's actually written a very interesting article about this archetype and his opinions on it and his results of testing, so I'm going to link that in the description down below, and also I will link his podcast because they are also producing some great content. Bear in mind the podcast is not PG, but yeah, the article will be safe for everyone, so please enjoy that. So with these slideshow videos, I'll go through the basic concept of the deck, followed up by the list, a few matchups, and then some tech options as well. So what is Silvally Buzzwole and why does it work? Well, the basic concept is going to be a very early beat stick combined with a late game finisher. And this is pretty simple, combining the two best cards of the new set essentially. When we basically see the new set, many people see Buzzwole as a strong card, many people see Silvally as a strong card, but sometimes not everyone knows the best way to play the decks separately. So why not try and merge the two best cards from the new set together and see what comes up. And essentially this deck is all about maths. And it's quite simple really. The maths is very good with these cards. Buzzwole is a great early game beat stick with that Jet Punch attack. Probably one of the most efficient attacks in the game that we have right now on a tanky 190 HP basic Pokemon. It's all very good stuff. The Jet Punch doing 30 and 30 to one of your opponent's benched Pokemon is amazing. It sets up damage against basic EX and GX Pokemon for the Silvally to come in later on in the game, but also it's amazing against evolution decks, of which there are a lot in the format. Both Stage 1 and 2s both heavily struggle against an evolve approach, and Jet Punch is one of the best ways that we can try and get that rolling as early as possible, especially in combination with Heavy Potown, with which we play in this deck as well. So Buzzwole is an amazing beat stick, and we're going to use Silvally as more of a late game centric card to try and finish off things that we've poked early with Jet Punches, and also we have the amazing GX attack that Silvally carries for a big blow up of anything during the game if anything gets too out of hand. And typically there are decks that do have to overextend because Buzzwole is such a tanky dude himself and only commits one energy on his own side, so throughout the game we can be pressuring with Buzzwole while stacking up energies around our board onto multiple Silvally and other Buzzwole on the bench as well. Silvally also really helps us with his ability, Gyro Unit giving us free retreat around our board, so we can retreat between damaged Buzzwoles. We can move into our Silvally when we need to without much question, so that is very cool. We can control our board very nicely thanks to the Gyro Unit, and we also even have type coverage for this guy, which is surprising because he's colorless and you wouldn't really think that, but Buzzwole himself is weak to Psychic, and typically there are two ways that people will try and use this. They're going to go for either Garbodor, of course, but also Espeon GX is creeping into Drampagarb lists as pretty much a staple, sometimes even a 2-2 count, and Buzzwole really doesn't like to see that guy, but when we have free retreat, we can move out of confusion quite easily, and we can go into our Silvally GX, attach a Psychic Memory, and actually one-hit KO those cards as well, so we cover each other's weaknesses quite nicely. Buzzwole is really good early pressure, but very weak to that Psychic, and Silvally is very good at dealing with Garbodor, because you can one-hit KO them, as well as having the weakness on the Espeon GX, so really, really nice pairing, and it's not one that's immediately obvious, but is actually quite strong together. So, let's jump into the deck list. First of all, we're going to play a 3-3 count of the Silvally GX. I've said he's more late game centric, and you're normally going to lead the charge with Buzzwole, so I think a 3-3 count makes the most sense. Having this Gyro Unit as early as possible is going to be helpful, and both his attacks are excellent. Doing 120 and being able to attach a basic energy from your discard pile to any of your benched Pokemon is very strong. You can set up other Silvally for later on in the game. You can even set up Buzzwole to use its second attack, Knuckle Impact, which deals 160, and this Pokemon can't attack during your next turn. There's even synergy there with Knuckle Impact because you can simply free retreat with the Gyro Unit into maybe a different Buzzwole, or you can do a free retreat and then Guzma himself back into the active. So that little bit of extra energy acceleration helps Buzzwole in the late game as well to finish out and finish with big attacks while you're just doing the early jet punches, which is really cool. And yeah, that 50 damage times each of your opponent's Pokemon in play is also just a really strong GX attack that you can go for. So Silvally is good in so many levels. The type Null, a couple of notes. He has 110 HP, which is really good for a basic that evolves. And it has that early 30 damage attack, reduces 30 done to itself, which can also help out with maths if you have a choice band especially. Either on the first turn when you do the 30 damage, that becomes 60, and then you can do 120 with the Silvally the following turn. Or you can do the 30 on turn 1, and if you find a choice band on turn 2, you can do 150 with your GX and finish off 180 HP EX and GXs, which is very, very strong. Then we are going to play 3 copies of Buzzwole. He is amazing. You want to start with him as much as possible. You could consider playing a 4th copy just for maxing out those odds, but typically if you go first anyway, it doesn't matter what you lead with, as long as you can find Silvally on turn 2, then you can just free retreat into your Buzzwole essentially. So I'm happy with the 3 count. He's obviously the early game beat stick, but also can be powered up via Silvally as well into that knuckle impact. You'll rarely go for Absorption GX as an option, just because Silvally's is pretty much stronger in most departments. So a really nice combination of cards here. And such a nice combination that we really don't need much support. We're just going to play 3 copies of Tapu Lele for the Wonder Tag, trying to be as consistent as possible and having the energy drive as an option also. And then we're just going to play 1 Espeon EX. That miraculous shine is finding its way into so many lists right now, and here is no different. Just because we are playing Buzzwole and Po-Town, it's just a really vicious combination for a lot of evolving decks. And we're also going to play the single copy of Oranguru. Oranguru has that amazing ability Instruct that can really help you out, especially because Buzzwole is so early and aggressive. We're oftentimes being end to a low hand size, and hopefully Oranguru can instruct us back into healthy numbers where things like Ultra Ball become outs and physically drawing into more supporters and Lele's can help you win the game. At least that's the idea. He can also use Psychic for a Double Colorless and another energy on top of that to help out against any Safeguard Pokemon if those are going to be cropping up, so bear that in mind. Onto the items, we're going to be playing 4 copies of Ultra Ball, pretty simple. 3 copies of Field Blower. It's a very high count, even though Gyro Unit is only like a minor help. But this does re-enable your ability, which can help out if you're going to be stalled. Bear in mind, you can just simply attach and start swinging with pretty much anything that gets stalled other than like Oranguru, I guess. So that's not a huge deal, but it can be helpful. The main reason why this is such a high count, however, is because of opposing Po-Towns, specifically against Drampa Garbodor, because it means that Silvally would otherwise be in range of a Berserk. Now, if you Field Blower Po-Town, you can evolve into your Silvally and stay out of range, which is very, very important. So Field Blower, very important for keeping you healthy with your Silvally, because he is oftentimes a big part of the Drampa Garbodor matchup, because Buzzwole is oftentimes early pressured by Espeon. Then you go into your Silvally with the Memory Plate and take a knockout, and then hopefully you can tank, you know, whatever comes in next. That's the idea, at least. So Field Blower makes that all happen. I'm going to play 3 copies of Choice Band. It's excellent for number fixing, as I've said a few times already. I kind of want to work in a 4th just because it is so strong, especially with Buzzwole in the early turns. Doing like 80 damage with a strong energy Choice Band is just insane, whilst also doing 30 to the bench. It's really, really efficient damage and very aggressive, and Choice Band is excellent on Silvally as well, especially once you've done a few jet punches here and there, putting things into range of slapping a Choice Band on and going for these knockouts. Really, really nice 3 count. Kind of want to work in a 4th if there's ever a 61st card. A few more things. 1 copy of Special Charge. We are playing 4 strong, 4 DCE. They're both integral. Strong energy, just doing more damage is always good, and DCE going to be great for the efficiency of Silvally and also going for energy drives at times as well. So pretty nice to recycle these cards. We are going to play 1 copy of Rescue Stretcher. We have a couple of important one-offs in the Espeon and the Oranguru. We can also get things like Lele if it's late on in the game, and we can even make sure we have thick lines of Silvally even if we have prized them, so that's pretty cool. 2 copies of the Psychic Memory that I've mentioned a few times. Gaining that Psychic typing is going to be really nice for helping out against Buzzwole's weakness, which is other Psychic type Pokemon. It even helps you out in mirror matches, I guess, so this could be pretty important. I like it as a 2 count. I don't think you'll ever really need more, but it is really important to find it in certain matchups. And then the 4 copies of Po-Town, as I've mentioned, we are going to try and devolve as many things as we can. There's Decidueye, there's Ninetales Zoroark, there's obviously Gardevoir, Metagross, plenty of evolutions out there that we can prey on, and Po-Town makes that all happen. Very good news for us. For supporters, we are going to be playing 1 copy of Brigette. It can get everything in the deck, basically, which is really cool. We are also going to be playing 1 copy of Lillie as a supporter, because oftentimes, as long as you start Buzzwole, all you want to do is find an energy, and you want to make sure you can find that energy, and you want it to be a strong energy as well, and sometimes even Choice Band on top of that can just be extra gravy. So having the Lillie in here, making you draw up to 8, can sometimes help you get these power turns and be as aggressive as possible. Additionally, I've basically cut an N for the Lillie, and that's because we take so many prizes anyway that I think even if you don't use Lillie on turn 1 or 2, it can still be better to draw off of your opponent using N in the late game than drawing just a 4th copy of N in your own deck. So I think you'll never be hindered by the Lillie, and it gives you good early aggressive options. We're going to play 2 copies of Acerola. Acerola is really nice when you have such an efficient, tanky, basic Pokemon that we have in Buzzwole. No surprise here, it can be really nice, and you don't really worry about the loss of tempo when you're losing essentially a turn of attachment, because you can sometimes regain those turns of attachments via Silvally GX's main attack. We then have 3 copies of N, still nice for some shuffle draw, still disruptive. Against some decks that you're going to try and devolve, oftentimes you will go down in prizes as your opponent beats through your Buzzwoles, while you're just sort of setting up the damage throughout the game, and you can maybe try and go for a devolve plus N on the same turn and really hurt them and set them back a huge amount. So 3 copies, still important. 4 copies of Guzma, very important when we are up against the basic GX and EX decks. We want to make sure that we're taking 2 prizes whenever possible, and also even when we're setting up these numbers early on with the Buzzwole, we want to make sure we're hitting the most important things that we want to devolve as quickly as possible. So Guzma is going to help us do that. It's also like our only other switching card if our ability goes offline, so I really like having the 4 count. And we are also going to play 4 copies of Professor Sycamore, trying to be as aggressive as possible. Also gets basic energies in the bin for the Silvally GX, so that's something to bear in mind. 4 is pretty much staple in everything. And finally, we will round it out with 13 energy total. 4 of them being Double Colorless for our Silvally and type Null, as well as Lele. 4 strong energy. It can only be used on our Buzzwole, but that's not a big deal. That extra buff of damage is just too important to miss out on, and it just makes us super efficient and can even push Knuckle Impact into ridiculous numbers as well when it comes to the late game, so that is excellent. And 5 copies of Basic Fighting. Hopefully gives us enough to see throughout the game that we can start putting some in the bin here and there with Ultra Balls and Sycamores, so that we can attack with our Silvally and get value, as well as, you know, attaching that onto Silvally itself. There's been a few things I'm thinking about. I may be cutting strong energy down to 3 just for a 6th basic energy, because Silvally in some matchups is just so important, and missing out on basic energy does sometimes hurt, and you also want to put some in the discard pile, so that's something I'm considering. Especially with special charge, maybe 3 strong energy is enough, but at the moment I'm sticking with the 4 just because the early aggression is just something you can't really sleep on. It's just so powerful at times. So yeah, at the moment I'm happy with this 13 energy split, but I could potentially see you dropping 1 strong energy for another basic. That could be fine. It's just really a matter of testing and seeing how often you get punished, really. How many times you see strong energy and just think that it's a useless card, and how many times you see it and think, man, this extra 20 is just too important to miss out on. So that's a debate you guys can have, but for now I'm happy with this energy split. So that leaves the full list here for you. 14 Pokemon total, 33 Trainers, Tools, Supporters, Stadiums, and 13 energy cards. It's a pretty safe staple, and yeah, has a lot of space for pretty much everything you need in your deck. I think it's very consistent and simple, and it has different outs for lots of different things. So pause it now if you want to take note of the list and start testing yourselves. Please do. Let's move on to matchups now, and there's actually not much that I think this deck is afraid of, surprisingly enough. I think One of the ones I have there is Buzzwole Lycanroc. It's kind of like a mirror match, but they have more fighting stuff, and we have Lycanroc. Oh, sorry, we have Silvally, which is weak to fighting. So we're pretty much playing the same deck, but we can't evolve into our stage 1, and they can. So that's probably a bad matchup. I put Vikavolt Tapu Bulu as an awkward matchup, even though we can try and target their Vikavolts even for devolve approaches. The fact that they can carve through our Silvally, carve through our Buzzwole with relative ease, I believe that would probably be a bad matchup as long as everything goes well their side. And Gliscor Garbodor, I think just because they can erase a lot of the damage we're trying to set up with Buzzwole, that could be awkward. Potentially though, just a Potown plus Buzzwole approach, especially if we hit our strong energies, could be good enough. In theory, I don't think it's great for us, but it could be better than I'm expecting. I need to test that matchup a little bit more, but in theory it doesn't sound great. And finally, Volcanion doesn't sound amazing either. Early pressure with Buzzwole, yes, it's nice, and hopefully it's going to be enough for us to get there, but sometimes it may not be the case. So Volcanion, I think, could also be awkward, mainly just because Baby Volcanion would be so awkward to get through. You really need to strain yourself to hit as many Guzmas as possible in that matchup to make sure you're taking 2 prizes every time with your Silvallies and hoping that you can just tank on certain turns. But that may be a rare case. So yeah, I think for many other things, you have fairly decent matchups on paper. I think one of the biggest things is really the Mr. Mime approach. Will Mr. Mime show up in decks? I think Gardevoir players are sort of leaning towards it in many cases. I don't think many other evolution decks are leaning towards it, to be honest. I haven't seen many Zoroark builds playing Mr. Mime. I think they already lose to Buzzwole, even if you aren't hitting the bench, so Mr. Mime may seem sort of like overkill. I don't think many Decidueye builds have the space for Mr. Mime physically on their bench. I don't think Metagross will play Mr. Mime either. I think they'd just play something like Brigette EX to stop like Please and stuff like that instead. Maybe they even go for Metal Fortress Bronzong. That would be awkward, but overall I think only really Gardevoir would be considering Mr. Mime right now. So I think you actually have a pretty clear path with Buzzwole in many cases. So I think any of these evolution decks, I think you have a huge chance against, just because of Buzzwole spread plus Potown at the right times is just so detrimental for them. So yeah, I think it's really good stuff. And at the moment, I have Drampagarb and Espeon Garb as sort of like even. They may end up being a little unfavorable just based on how quickly they get out their Espeon GX and how deadly it is against us. Obviously, we can move between our Buzzwoles and not worry about confusion too much, but tanking like 120 if they hit Choice Band is going to be awkward every single turn for you. Even if you are trying to set up their like Eevees for a devolve play, a lot of the time you want to be setting up your Silvally, and that takes a few turns, and you are also worried about Drampa using Righteous Edge throughout the game. So there's a lot of intricacies to that matchup, and I've not had enough games to know for certain if it's good or bad. Right now I'm sort of like down the middle with the matchups. I'm roughly 50-50 against Drampagarb that's also playing thick Espeon, so I think it's decent, and I wouldn't say it's outright a bad matchup for you. And I don't think it's one that you necessarily have to tech too hard against. Speaking of techs though, let's have a look at a few things. I've just mentioned Mr. Mime, and will he show up, and will we lose the game if we don't have Buzzwole doing his 30-30 against things like Guardy? And I think ultimately you probably won't do very well if they are setting up Mr. Mime as early as turn 1 with their Brigette plays, and that could very much be the case. So you may think about playing a 1-1 line of a Lowland Muck for that Power of Alchemy, shutting off Mr. Mime and also shutting off a few other things. Luckily it keeps Gyro Unit available. Obviously Muck can't benefit from that. My main worry is though that basically you can't fit Garbodor into the deck, right? Because we'd have to start fitting in things like 4 Floatstone, and we really don't have the spaces for that, but you do have space for just slipping in a 1-1 copy of Muck and hoping that helps out. It would definitely shut off Mr. Mime, which is going to be nice for you. And also it can improve your matchup against Volcanion, which also could be very important. So definitely one to experiment with. I think Muck may be important as long as people are playing Mr. Mime. Keep people honest. Make sure that they do tech for you and you can still find a way to win. That could be very good. Necrozma GX could again be another way you can try and help your Volcanion matchup, where Silvally isn't ideal. You can go for a big Black Ray and then just go for plenty of Jet Punches to take multiple prizes over turns and just win in that regard. The black ray does 100 to everything, and then choice band, strong energy, Buzzwole does 80-30, and that's just so sweet for you when you're hitting Volcanion EXs and also setting up things like Turtonators as well. That could be a really nice approach, and it also lends more towards the devolve plays as well in many situations, so he could be a one-of copy that's very nice. Kartana GX is another one. Just thinking that we have bench space in this deck a lot of the time. You only really need to have like 2 Buzzwole in play. You can Acerola those up throughout the game as well. And you only really need to have like 2 Silvally in play as well. So then that leaves a generous amount of room for things like Tapu Lele's, Oranguru, and also maybe a Kartana here or there to get rid of some special energy throughout the game. That could also be really nice for you. There's a few close matchups, as I've said, like the Drampa Garbodor. Maybe something like a Kartana could swing it back in your favour that little bit more. So he could find his way into this deck as a one-off copy as well. Finally, just Skylar. Skylar's really nice at the moment. At the moment, I'm playing 1 copy of Lillie instead, because I think it's more aggressive to try and find your early energy for Buzzwole. But Skylar could also be nice for trying to pull out specific item cards, definitely things like the memory cards. Maybe even Potown's important enough to search out in the early turns if it is an evolution deck. These could all be very important. It also gets you Field Blower to be less worried about Potown on your opponent's side as well. So Skylar could end up creeping into this deck as a one-of, maybe even a 2-of if you really have space. There's not too many things right now that I can think about cutting, but I do have generous counts of like 4 Potown and such. You may find a space here or there to try and lower those to fit in some of these consistency cards like Skylar, or if you like one of these techs that's currently on the screen, you could go for that. So that is going to be it, guys. That is Silvally Buzzwole. It's an archetype that I don't think many people have been talking about, and it's one that I'm fairly hyped for. I just love doing early pressure with Buzzwole and actually having a good follow-up play outside of just using like elixirs or whatnot. I think many people have been going towards that route, but I think elixirs are fairly inconsistent, and it's item usage, which just leads towards Garbodor using Trash Launch and ruining your day. Even if you are playing things like Zygarde, it's still going to be hard for you because your overall attackers just aren't that good. Whereas I think Silvally is much more efficient and has some good synergy here and there, type-wise, and also gaining the Gyro unit. I think it's a really nice pairing. So, what do you guys think? Is this a good pairing? Do you think this is the best way to play Silvally or Buzzwole? There's still going to be, I think, 1 more Silvally build and like 3 or 4 more Buzzwole builds, because it's one that both Jack and I are hyped on the card, and really because the set isn't that strong overall in depth, we're having to show you lots of different builds of like similar Pokemon like Buzzwole. We're going to have many different builds, so you can basically pick your favorite way to play Buzzwole and start testing him extensively if you think he's up your alley, which he very much is for me, because it's just an early aggressive card, and I like being an early aggressive player right now when you have cards like Oranguru to really make you less worried about N and losing the game. So yeah, I really think that aggro is good right now, seeing as though everyone's going for Brigette and playing lots of these 60 HP basic Pokemon. I think Buzzwole is just ready to take the format by storm, in my opinion. Even with that psychic weakness, I think we can get around it. But let me know what you guys think, guys. Did you like this list? Did you think there was anything missing? Did you like the techs? Would you definitely play a Alolan Muck? Are you thinking of playing Mr. Mime in any of your evolution decks? Let me hear it all down below. Leave a like to this video if you did, and subscribe to the channel if you've not already. For now though, it has been Joe from OmniPoke, and I'll be seeing you guys next time. Cheers.